Hi everybody! Welcome to the Knitted Kitchen blog hop. I'm Pia with Stitches and Scraps, and this is pattern number 46, the Latvian Braid Washcloth. I'll be using Lion Brand 24/7 cotton yarn, which I did receive for free from Lion Brand for this project. The colorways I'm using are grass and lilac. So let's get started on how to make the Latvian braid. So here you can see we've started the washcloth with the same seed stitch border that we've been doing all along, plus there's the 4 stitches of seed stitch on each edge. The Latvian braid is a 3-row repeat. There's a setup row and then 2 rows that make up the braid, and then in between we've got 2 rows of stockinette. So the way that this works is that basically you're knitting alternating colors, okay? Knitting or purling, depending on the size you're on, alternating colors. And this braid look is created by how you carry the non-working color. We carry it consistently one way, and then when we're working back in the other direction, we carry it the same way, but because we're working the other way, it twists the other way. So that gives us this back and forth look, which makes the braid. So let's see how that works. I've done my 2 rows of stockinette as a buffer, and I'm ready to start the next row. So I'm on a wrong side row, and I've started the way we always do with the seed stitch border, which is slip 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. So I've got that done, and now I'm ready to bring in the second color. When I'm using 2 colors, I generally like to, with stranded, I generally like to do one in one hand and one in the other hand, so I don't have to keep dropping my yarn. If you're more comfortable dropping your yarn in between and picking up the other color, that's fine too. You're going to have to do that for the next 2 rows anyway. So let's start. The first stitch is going to be purple. And as you can see, I've been carrying the yarn up between the braids because there's only 2 stitches, 2 rows in between each of the braids. If there was more, I would probably cut the yarn and then start a new piece of yarn with the new braid. But so let's start with this one, purple. And we're purling because we're on the wrong side and we want it to look like knit in the front. Okay, so now get this one out of the way and purl with the green. And remember, keep the yarns floating on the wrong side here. Purple and green. Oops, I split the yarn. Green. Okay, and we're just going to continue like that, purling across this row, alternating between purple and green. So I've come to the last 4 stitches of the row. I've been alternating green and purple, and now I'm just going to do my seed stitch border, so I'm going to drop the purple. Instead of dropping it to the back, I'm going to drop it to the front so that it is where I want it to be for the next row, which you'll see when we get there. So now I'm just going to finish my seed stitch edge, and then I'll do the seed stitch edge on the front too. So that is knit, purl, purl, knit, purl. And when I turn it around, you will see that I have alternated between green and purple stitches, and they look like knit stitches on the front. Okay, so let's do our seed stitch border on this side. Keep the purple out of the way. Got a little tangled there. There we go. All right. So slip, knit, purl, knit. And now for the fun part. Let's do a Latvian braid. So the goal is basically we're going to carry the yarn in a certain way so that it forms this shape. The first stitch is a purple stitch, and we're going to do only purls on this side. So I'm going to bring the green yarn to the front as well. Okay, and here is where you're going to have to do a lot of dropping the yarn and picking it back up again as we go. Both yarns are in the front. Okay, purl with the purple yarn just like normal. It's just all there by itself. So the first stitch we're just going to do like normal with a purple purl. Okay, now for the direction that I want to go, which is I want to go this way, okay? I am going to always be picking up the next yarn from underneath the current yarn. So what does that mean? That means when I put this yarn down, I'm going to put it over the other yarn. So when I pick this yarn up, it's coming up from underneath. That is the whole secret to this Latvian braid. Okay, what in actuality what I do is I drape this over the top of the needle so that when I pick this one up, it's from underneath. But basically this yarn has to be coming from underneath this one. And I purl this stitch. And now I'm going to do that again, put this one down and pick this one up from underneath. So when we do this, we are always twisting the yarn in the same direction. The one that we're picking up is always coming from underneath. So you know what that means for your working yarn. It means that you're going to have a really tangled mess by the time you're done with your row. And you can see that starting already where the yarns are getting twisted. Oh, of course, I can't see that here. But yeah, you can see the yarns are starting to get twisted around each other. That's going to get worse as you finish the row, but then it's going to be corrected on the next row because we'll be doing it the other way. So continue picking up from the bottom and purling the next stitch. And then drop this one on top, pick this one up from the bottom. I got a tangle now. And purl the next stitch. Okay, drop it on top, pick up from the bottom, purl the next stitch. And you can start to see the bottom part of the braid forming. Okay, now do you see these little bumps here? These purl bumps are coming from that setup row that we did, which is why we need the setup row to have alternating colors. Otherwise, this would all be one color in the middle. And that's actually a pretty fun look too. So if you don't want to do the setup row, you can do that. You just won't have the alternating colors in the middle, and it won't be a Latvian braid, but it's still a cool look. So I'm going to finish the row going like this. I do want to show you that if I did this the other way, instead of crossing the purple over the green and picking up the green from underneath, if I went the other way and I put the purple down on the bottom and then picked the green up from the top, the green would cross over in the opposite direction. So I'm going to do a couple stitches that way just to show you the difference when you cross the other way. Okay, if I put that one down underneath, if I put that one down underneath and I pick the purple up over the top, okay, put that one down underneath, pick the green up over the top, and I'll show you where the change is here. You can see now in these last 3 stitches, this is where I shifted it, so that one looks all wonky, but then you can see that this is actually going in the opposite direction. So if you wanted to make this braid instead of this braid, you could do that by switching which direction you are, which direction you're taking the stitches over the others. Sorry, which direction you are picking up the yarn. Okay, so I'm back to where it's correct, I believe. Let me do one more here. All right, so now to show you the right way. In this pattern, what we're going to do is we're working on a right side row and then a wrong side row. So if we do the exact same thing, when we work on the wrong side row, it's going to tilt the other way because we're working backwards. So that's how we get these. And the way we're alternating the directions of the braids is this braid starts with a setup row on a wrong side, and this braid starts with a setup row on a right side. So we don't ever have to change the way we're doing the actual braid stitch because the alternating of the rows does it for us. So you'll never have to bring the yarn up from on top for this pattern. But if you wanted to change the direction for another pattern, you could bring the yarn up on top instead of bringing it up from the bottom. Okay, but for this pattern, we are bringing the yarn up from the bottom every time. So put this one down on top, bring the next yarn up from the bottom. Okay, I'm going to finish this row and come back to you on the next row. So I've come to the end of this row and just have the seed stitch border left, and you can see that I've got the whole rope-like stitch pattern going for the bottom of the braid. Now I'm going to drop my purple yarn, and I'm going to need it to be on the right side for the next row, so I'm going to go ahead and drop it on the right side. With this green yarn though, I still want to pick it up from underneath this yarn, so I'm going to drop this one on top, pick up the green one underneath, and finish my seed stitch border, which is, oops, I need that to be at the back because it is knit, purl, knit, and don't drop the stitch, purl. Okay, so there is my first side of the Latvian braid. Now I'm going to flip it over and work the wrong side. And you'll notice that the yarn is hopelessly tangled. If you're anything like me, that is going to drive you crazy, but don't worry about it and don't try to fix it, because when we work this back side, it's going to untangle. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to do exactly the same thing, because when I have the stitches, well, exactly the same thing except in knit stitches instead of purl. Because if the stitches slant in the same direction, now we're working in the opposite direction, so they will end up looking like the opposite of this side. So, okay, I know that didn't make too much sense saying it, but you'll see it when it happens. So we start with the seed stitch border, slip, knit, purl, and knit. And now this first stitch here, the purple yarn is here, the green yarn is here. We're not passing anything under anything or over anything. We're just going to pick up and knit this purple yarn right where it is, all by itself. So knit that. Okay, and you can see it's all by itself. It's not wrapped around anything. Now we get started wrapping. And just like we did before, we want to bring the new yarn up from underneath. So we're going to drop the old yarn on the top. See that? Drop it over the top, bring the new yarn up from underneath it, and knit with it, because now we're knitting instead of purling. So knit with the new yarn. Don't worry if the stitch gets loose, you'll tighten it when you pick up the yarn again. So knit with this yarn, drop it over the top, pick up the old yarn from the bottom, snug it up a little bit, and knit this stitch. And just keep going like that. Drop it on top, pick up the new yarn, and knit. Drop it over the top, pick up the new yarn, and knit. Pick up the new yarn, and knit. So the motion's a little bit different, but what you're doing is the same. You're dropping it on top, you're picking it up underneath, and you're knitting. So this is basically the knit version of what we did on the other side. I'll do one more stitch and then I'll turn this around so you can see what it looks like. Okay. And you can see that now these stitches are slanting in the other direction. These ones go this way, these ones go this way, and that is what gives us that V-shaped braid just like we have down here. I'm going to finish this row and show you what it looks like. The other thing I want to point out is you notice now that we are twisting the yarn in the opposite direction. So you can see where it's twisted here, and we are actually untwisting it as we go. So by the time we finish the row, if you've done it right, your yarn should be completely untwisted. You might have one twist in it from when you turned your work, but otherwise it should be completely untwisted. So again, drop the old yarn on top, pick up the new yarn from the bottom, and knit. So I finished this row other than the seed stitch border, and now I'm done with the purple yarn. I'm not going to use it again for another few rows, so this time instead of dropping it in the front, I'm going to go ahead and bring it around to the back, And as I work the next couple of rows, I'll carry it up with me so that it's in place when I need it again. Now that tangled the yarn just a little bit, but other than that, my yarn is completely untangled from the mess that I had before. So it really does work. Working it back in the other direction should untangle your yarn for you. If it hasn't, you might have missed something or been going in the wrong direction. So now I'm going to finish this border with my knit, purl, knit, and purl. Okay, and that is the end of that row. So when we turn it around, you can see, ta-da, we have the full perfect Latvian braid going in this direction. Well, pointing in this direction. Now notice this one goes in the opposite direction. We're going to do that one next, but there's 2 rows of stockinette in between. So I'm just going to go ahead and do those 2 rows of stockinette and come back to you when I'm ready to start the next braid. I've done my 2 rows of stockinette and I'm now ready to start my next braid. And here's where the magic happens. Last time we started a braid, if you notice, we were on the wrong side of the work. And this time we're on the right side. So now everything we do is going to be reversed, which means our setup row, where we first get the alternating purples and greens, that's going to be done on the right side. So we're going to knit that row, okay? Our first row of the actual braid itself is going to be done on the wrong side row. If we do that exactly the same way we did this one, that means we'll be doing this row first. Well, guess what? That row is the same thing as this row. So we do that row first, and then we'll be doing the final row on the right side. So we'll be doing that row. Let me get something pointy to point with. Okay, so instead of doing this row first and then doing this row, what we're going to be doing is doing this row first and then this row. So in essence, that flips our braid and gives us this braid instead of this braid. And that's exactly what we want. So let's get started doing that. And I'm going to go through it much faster this time than last time because it's all the same rows, just in a different order. Well, except for this first row. This first row is different because it's going to be knit instead of purl. So this first setup row, let's get our seed stitch border done. Slip, knit, purl, knit. Okay. Now we want to alternate purple and green. So we pick up our purple because we're going to start with purple. And again, I like to do this with one in each hand, so I'm just going to pick up my purple in that hand and my green in this hand and knit alternating colors. So knit that one and then that one. And I'm just going to go across the row this way, knitting in alternating colors. So I finished the setup row, and once again I dropped the purple to the right side of the work so that it's where I need it for the next row. And now I'm going to start on the first row of the braid, and that is first the seed stitch border, knit, purl, slip, knit. My hands knew what they were doing, my head did not. Purl and knit. Okay, once again I'm just going to pick up the purple right where it is, and this time I'm on the wrong side row. So I want these to look like pearls in the front, so I'm going to knit them. So just pick this up and knit it. And now I start doing my flip-flopping here. Once again, I'm going to drop this on top and pick up the other color from the bottom. And I'll do that all the way across the row, pick up from the bottom and knit. Just like we did last time. I finished that row. I have my little rope-like edge here, and you can see that it's going in the same direction as this top row on the last braid, which means that it's going, the end braid is going to be opposite of what we had last time. I've dropped my purple yarn in the front again for the next row, and I have my ungodly tangle of yarn behind it. So everything is as it should be. So now I'm going to do my seed stitch border. And the yarn does get a little hard to pull after a while, but just bear with it. It'll untangle on this row. Okay, so, oops, sorry. Start with a slip, knit, purl, and knit. Okay, I need both yarns at the front because I'm on a right side row and I'm going to be purling. So both my yarns are at the front. I start with the purple without crossing anything over anything. So there's my purple, and now I start again with crossing over the top and bringing up the new yarn from the bottom. So the purple is crossed over the top and the green is coming up from the bottom. And let's do that again. Green crosses over the top, purple comes up from the bottom. And we finish this row. This should look very familiar. This was the first row that we did on the last braid. So I'll get across the row and show you this final braid. So I've come to the end of the row, and now I just have the seed stitch border. I'm finished with the purple, so it can go hide out at the back until I'm ready for it for the next braid, and I will carry it up. And then the green can also go to the back because I'm about to do a knit stitch. And I just do my border like normal, which is knit, purl, knit, no, I split the yarn, knit, and purl. So there you have it. That is how you do the Latvian braid. And you can see that this braid is now pointing in the opposite direction of this one. So as we keep going, because it's an odd number of rows for each repeat, we're going to keep going back and forth between these two braids. And that's it for this square. Now, if you do other Latvian braid patterns, you may not always be coming up the same way. Sometimes, depending on the angle that they want you to go in, you may be picking up your yarn from the top and putting the old yarn underneath, rather than what we've been doing, which was putting the old yarn on top and picking up the new yarn from underneath. So be sure to read your pattern very carefully. It worked for us because we're doing back and forth on opposite rows, wrong side, right side, wrong side, right side. But particularly if you're working in the round, you'll need to pick up the yarn different ways to make it go in the opposite directions. So be sure to read your pattern that you're working on. This was the last of my patterns for the Knitted Kitchen blog hop, so I hope you've enjoyed the event. If you missed any of my previous patterns, be sure to check them out. I've made a playlist on YouTube with all of the videos, but also go take a look at my blog for the full patterns. That's stitchesandscraps.com. There are still 2 other patterns in the Knitted Kitchen blog hop that will be released in the next couple of weeks, and then we're all done with the blog hop for the year. So it's been a great year, and I thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll join me again the next time we do an event.